So, Nick, if you had to categorize the special effects for the Bill and Ted movies, what do they remind you of?
Ghostbusters.
Back
to the future. Star Wars.
1.21 gigawatts! Hey everyone, welcome back to AsArt. Nick and John. We post 3 videos a week, so go and click subscribe. Head over to asart.space for all the audio and video links. Nick, we've talked about Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. We've talked about Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Now we're combining those two, but just talking about the special effects.
Now we're going to talk about Bill and Ted's special effects.
Bill and Ted's special effects, excellent effects. So just to differentiate, up until a number of years ago, there was separate Academy Awards for special effects, which was more practical, hand-done, things like that, not computer-based. And then you have visual effects, which are computer-based. In the second movie, in Bogus Journey, you get some very, very early visual effects. For the vast majority of these, we're going to be talking about special effects, more traditional, practical-based.
Mm-hmm. Perpetual Motion Pictures, John, is the studio that worked on this film. And they actually started their studio for this movie. Isn't it crazy? In 1987.
Yeah, which is really, really cool.
Like, how cool is that? That's so sick.
How seldomly. So this used to be the norm. Before Industrial Light and Magic in 1977 with Star Wars, usually you had people in the special effects industry, and it was very, very handful of people. They would come together for a movie, and they would just disband. And there was no constant companies. And then Industrial Light and Magic came around. They were the first company that kind of stuck around and said, we're going to be a special effects and eventually a visual effects company and offer our services to movies as they're needed. Now, you don't see that happen very often for a particular movie. In The Matrix, once the first Matrix was really successful, they formed ESC for the second and third one. But here we're getting for Bill and Ted, another Keanu Reeves film, they actually formed the visual effect or the special effects company for this movie. And so you want to give a little bit of the background?
Yeah, so they worked on, the first one was Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. It doesn't say they worked on the Bogus one, though. So that might have been a different studio.
Second one, Bogus Journey.
But they also worked on Return of the Jedi. So the work they must have did in Bill and Ted, I wonder where the creator came from. I wish there was more information on the site where the artist came from before they just started the studio. But I would be very interested if some of them came from Industrial Light and Magic, maybe.
I'm sure some of them did. It's very common for people in their about page to say, okay, our company's comprised of people that have worked on this, this, and this. And it just means maybe one or two, or maybe someone that's worked there, or a principal, like main founder of the studio came from that. But really, really cool stuff, and definitely you see the similarities. So the first movie that Nick thought about when we were talking about this was Ghostbusters, right? And so that was not done by Industrial Light and Magic necessarily, but by a offshoot of Industrial Light and Magic people. Richard Edlund, who's kind of famous in the visual effects and special effects circles, started his own company, and they did the effects for Ghostbusters on a really tight budget. But you could definitely see how it carried over from the Star Wars films. Here,
and we did a great video on Ghostbusters too, guys. Check it out. We talk about the cloud tanks, which we're going to talk about here, but we go into really good detail on cloud tanks if you're interested about cloud tanks and like hand-drawn lightning effects and stuff like that, where we really break it down in that film. We'll touch on it here, but we really break it down in that Ghostbuster film. You guys should go check it out.
That is a really fun one. So Nick thought of Ghostbusters. I thought of Back to the Future, because there's shots within these movies where the phone booth, they don't want to have to animate it coming in and going out every single time. They do a lot, actually. They do a lot. They show a lot of stuff they don't necessarily need to show, but sometimes when they don't want to have to show it, they just kind of pan to the screen left or screen right, and they just show some flashing lights, and then you just assume, okay, they went in time travel because you heard the sound. Same thing that they would do in Back to the Future when the car would be time traveling. They would just pan over, and then boom, you'd see the time travel. And it's a very cost-efficient way of getting across the idea of what's going on without having to animate every time. Same thing with lightsabers and everything else that's happened.
But if this was like their first movie, though, for the studio, they probably wanted to go out to show their skills and stuff, too, so they can probably start reaching out. So they probably, I know a lot of studios do this. They'll do it for cheap, so they get like a movie under its belt so they can advertise to other studios to get. I mean, they probably, maybe the reason why they didn't get it was because maybe they priced higher for the second film. And they were just like, oh, no. Then they went on to do Return of the Jedi, where there was a bigger budget.
They definitely did some elements of Return of the Jedi. Industrial Light and Magic did the bulk of the work, but it's very common in the visual effects and special effects industry to
outsource,
farm out shots to different studios. And so you'd be curious to hear what exactly they did. Like, they could have done something as simple as they did the Emperor's lightning, that was coming from his fingertips. They maybe animated that because it looks like they were good at that. So you have no idea what they did, but it's cool that they went on and they're still around. So Nick went to the website. What is their website again?
pmpfx.com. When I applied to Rough Draft Studios when I worked on Futurama, their website was nothing special either. I feel like it's just like, hey, these are the movies we worked on. This is our email if you need to send us info. You know what I mean? Or this is our phone number. I feel like it's just like the basics of basics. Nothing fancy needs to be on there kind of thing. And
it's very common that if you're working, you don't need to take the time to update your stuff because you're working. And it's when you don't have the time, you're like, all right, let's make everything look really pretty and things like that. Yeah. But it's cool. So, I mean, founded from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and they're still doing a lot of work. They've worked on a lot of really cool shows and a lot of different ones. And in their About section, it's fun because they talk about what they specialize in. They talked about optical compositing in optical ways. So optical means you're not using the computer at all. It's all exposing different parts of the film in a very complex process. Very, very hard to do. Maybe we'll talk about that sometime in a separate video, like optical versus
totally,
like
let's do
computer generated and how they transition and things like that.
Subscribe if you want to see that video. Subscribe, comment down below. Hold John to it. Hold John to it. But really, really cool stuff. And they're one of the studios that were able to bridge that gap. And I think they said the first movie they did digital work on was Dragonheart, right? That's the Sean Connery dragon, right? Dang, how'd you know that?
Picture. Because
Man,
I remember
how'd you know he acted in it? That was good, John.
That was one of his last. Was that one? I don't know if that was one of his last roles, but that was a big deal. That was one of the very first digital creatures that talked. I think Jurassic Park was before that, but that talked, that was fully articulated speech and things like that. It was a really cool effect for the time.
And they also worked on Titanic too.
Oh, let's see. So they worked on significant stuff. Again, how extensive they worked on that, we don't know, but it's really, really cool that they worked on all that stuff.
It's not the biggest poster on their website. Their biggest posters on their website is like Knocked Up, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Godless, which is a Netflix show, and Return of the Jedi. The other posters seem smaller. Maybe they didn't do as much work on the smaller posters.
Maybe they did more work on that. But it's just cool to know that Keanu Reeves basically made this company. Keanu Reeves made Escape or ESC that did all the effects for the second, third Matrix films. And again, Keanu Reeves didn't do that, but it's cool that Keanu Reeves franchises that he was part of kind of spurred those on, which is really, really cool stuff.
So awesome.
And that they're still around to this day is awesome because ESC is, not around anymore. So really, really cool stuff. Any shots you want to really talk about that you thought really, really worked well or that maybe didn't work as well?
The first one we already talked about, like the phone booth disappearing and the lightning and the lights effect. We talked a little bit about the clouds and stuff, which was cool. But one thing that's really cool is in the second film is when there's two of them on screen. One, it's fun for the story, and the framing works. It completely works, and the doubles work really well, too. The way they're framed with the doubles, where they're going up the hill and they have their arms behind their back and all that fun stuff like that.
It's just fun. Works. It's fun, clever solutions. Nick was talking about in the Bogus Journey video that we did, how he's talking about, when the heads are in the trash cans, it's just everything was planned out where it didn't have to be super crazy effects, right? But when they needed to, they did for sure, but they planned it out as carefully as they could. And again, we're covering Perpetual Motion and then also the second one as well, which it doesn't seem they worked on, but we're just kind of jumping around, but really cool effects, really, really fun stuff. And then Nick was talking about in the second video about the puppetry, like the animatronics for the faces on these kind of Yoda type characters, but that were actually moving around the screen. Like that's hard to do. That's
really reminded me of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle live action films that Jim Henson worked on. Yeah. I'm curious if Jim Henson worked on this because like who else was doing that stuff at this time? I feel like Jim Henson was doing all that stuff.
Yeah, and just because, that's actually a very good point. Just because one company doesn't worked on it doesn't mean there's not a bunch of other companies that worked on it as well. But it looked really, really cool. And the thing is, it worked really well because it's a comedy. It's not meant to be taken super seriously. That's why the time travel works and things like that. But just really, really fun content. But really, if you really look at it, really complex effects that they're doing in the film as well.
One thing I want to say about I thought it was so cool when the robots when they tell the time machine thing to go away and they put the glasses on, it was red and blue. That's like, I know, 3D.
It does a 3D thing. I thought that was hilarious. Yeah, that was a super fun shot. That was really, really funny. And I just loved one of my favorite effects. It just made me chuckle a lot. Is when they pull the skin off their mouths and you see the skeletons.
Oh, yeah.
When they pull open their abdomens and you see everything. They're like, check it out, and they just pull it. It's just really, really corny but funny stuff. But takes a lot of effort to make it look even, comedically passable, which is really, really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this was a pretty fun depiction of hell. Like I'm fascinated. Growing up, I was always fascinated by always fascinated by Paradise Lost, Dante's Inferno, but then visual depictions in games and movies is always really fun. So you thought was impressive.
Yeah, I also liked how the walls were short, where they had to like hunch over. It makes you almost feel uneasy and not comfortable.
It felt like it reminded me of Alien, where very, very tight corridors, you can't move very much, and it gave you that oppressive feeling. And then, of course, it combined with the lighting, it really worked well.
The whole warp where she's like, "Give me a kiss."
Oh, that was so gross.
Yeah, like the close up on the cameras and the colors.
Can you imagine whoever played that part? They must have been laughing so hard as soon as they cut. Give us a kiss.
Did it? Maybe it's been a while since I've seen Beetlejuice, but it kind of reminded me of Beetlejuice.
It did have a little bit of Beetlejuice vibe to it.
I haven't watched Beetlejuice in a while. Anyways, it kind of reminded me because of the funky shapes of the houses and the buildings and stuff. How everything was like forced perspective, extreme. Nothing was straight and slanted. And like when they were like even like the bunk beds were all very warped in perspective and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Give me infinity push-ups or whatever.
Like, I don't think I can do infinity push-ups. Maybe if we do girl push-ups. It was so funny. There is so much, and we're getting away from effects a little bit, just so much fun humor. But the big thing is the effects complement the humor very well. Yes, it complements it very, very well. I thought actually, in some cases, the effects went on a little bit too long in certain cases. Like those, with the little animatronic characters, I felt like they showed them a little bit longer than they actually needed to, but they probably spent a fortune on them, so they wanted to
when they jumped together to like form.
I thought that was kind of funny. Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah.
Station.
Station.
And I like the way their butt looks too when they're walking. I think there was that one scene when they first get out of the car, which they did not close the doors. I thought it was so weird that they didn't shut. They like left the doors open to the van. But anyway, I loved how like they were moving. I just loved it, like the way because they had big feet and like the little. I don't know. It just was so much fun to see their movement.
Just fun art direction on it. Yeah, it was really fun. And you know what? If we're jumping back and forth, and this is not really special effects, but it's set design, things like that. In the first one, they go through a lot of environments in time very quickly. And, they had some really cool sets. And that's definitely a skill set in and of itself we're only going to have this on screen for maybe a minute, where we're going to go get, Genghis Khan, however you want to pronounce it. We're going to have him there. Then we're going to go to Napoleon. And that's a lot of money to burn through really quickly, especially when they only had a $6 million budget on the first film. Again, maybe not categorized as effects work, but still just as impressive, especially to do it on such a low.
The effects perfectly complemented the comedy, the writing, the story. It was perfect. Like not perfect, but like it blended really well together with the pacing of the film to like even like the rock and roll. Like it's so cool. Like lightning is like used for like the transferring because it's so like heavy metal rock and roll kind of thing. And it's just, even though it was very weird when they go to the future. Like I hope that's not our future. It seems pretty dull and boring. Like, like just like floating around and like be excellent to each other. Party on. It's just so interesting too. Like in the second one, I feel like their outfits even changed. They gave them like Mario boots, like these thick boots, and like George Carlin wasn't wearing like his trench coat thing. He was like wearing white, which kind of threw me off a little bit, but it's George Carlin, so everything's fine. Like, I don't know if I can see Eddie Van Halen wearing that. So originally we talked about this in the films. They wanted to cast Eddie Van Halen as Rufus. I don't know if I could see him wearing that. I don't know. I mean, I could see him wearing the spandex and stuff, but not the big bubbly shoes.
So fun though. So fun. So if you have not seen these movies, definitely check them out. The third one, maybe by the time you see this, has already come out, but in 2020 we're getting the third Bill and Ted. Really long time coming. People have requested that for years. Really interesting to see how it's going to come out. From what I've read, they're trying to splice in old footage of them young, like B-roll footage, to make it seem like they're jumping around in time with their present day selves, which is going to be very interesting. Depending on what footage they have, that could be a disaster. It could be really successful. So it'll be fun to see. Again, that's kind of under editing, but also under effects a little bit as well, especially depending on what type of values they put them under.
And deep fake their faces on. By the way, we're doing an awesome deep fake of Bill and Ted. Subscribe so you get notified when the deep fake comes out. It's of a very popular YouTuber. Not going to spoil it here if it's not out yet, but click that link. Check it out.
And for all the other links, head over to asart.space. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next AsArt.